It was supposed to be just a chill weekend of few friends. Some snacks, music, and a sunny afternoon by the pool in my own backyard. Nothing wild, nothing crazy. Just good vibes and laughter echoing through the fence line. But of course, that's when she showed up. Every neighborhood has one. The self-appointed HOA enforcer. The kind of person who peers through the blinds and takes notes on your lawn height. Ours. Her name's Karen. And let's just say she's earned the title in every way possible. Now, I didn't expect her to like the party. Honestly, I didn't even think she'd notice, but I definitely didn't expect her to storm onto my property. Shout about HOA violations that didn't even exist. And then whip out her phone to call 911. That's right, she actually called. The police on me for having a pool party in my own backyard. No laws broken, no noise complaints filed, no reason at all. Just pure entitlement wrapped up in HOA drama. The weirdest part, the police actually showed up. And that's when things got interesting. Because the moment they stepped onto the scene and heard what was going on, karma didn't waste a second. What happened next was so unexpected, even I couldn't believe it. Let's just say the officers didn't leave empty-handed and Karen, well, she got exactly what she had coming. If you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare or had a neighbor who took things way too far, you're going to want to hear how this unfolded. Trust me, the twist is better than fiction. So stay tuned, because this story, it's just getting started. Karen's day is about to take a turn. She never saw coming. So here's the thing, this wasn't my first run-in with Karen. Ever since I moved into this neighborhood, it's been lurking around, always finding something to complain about. One time, it was my trash cans being an inch too far from the curb. Another time, she left a note because my porch light was too bright. But this, calling 911 over a backyard pool party, that hit a whole new level of petty. I made sure to follow every single HOA guideline. I checked the community rules twice before even sending out invites. The music volume was kept low, people were respectful, and we wrapped it up before sunset. This was no wild rager, was a casual get-together with friends and family, including kids. But of course, when Karen peeked through her blinds and saw more than 5 people in my yard, she probably panicked like it was some kind of code red. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Karen isn't even on the HOA board. She just acts like she is. She walks around with a clipboard, takes photos of people's driveways, and tells delivery guys where they can and can't park. People mostly ignore her, but I think she enjoys the attention. She thrives on control. But that day, when she saw the pool party from her upstairs window, she didn't just complain. She marched over in her big sun hat, yelling about unauthorized gatherings, accusing me of violating community standards, and then said those 3 words that made everyone stop mid-laugh. I'm calling 911 at first. We thought she was bluffing. I mean, who does that? But sure enough, 5 minutes later, we heard sirens in the distance, and the mood shifted. Everyone looked at me like, is this for real? That's when I realized Karen wasn't just playing games, but she was out to make a scene and whatever was coming next. I had no idea how wild it was about to get. As the sirens got closer, everyone at the party grew quiet. The music stopped, the laughter faded, and people started gathering their things like they were expecting some kind of raid. I tried to stay calm, but inside, I was boiling. This wasn't just some HOA complaint anymore. Karen had turned a harmless pool party into a full-blown emergency call. All because, what? She didn't like people enjoying themselves. When the police finally pulled up, Karen was already standing at the curb, waving them down like she was directing traffic. She had this smug look on her face, like she'd just saved the neighborhood from some terrible threat. The officers stepped out, clearly expecting something serious. You could see the confusion on their faces the moment they realized it was just a backyard party with floating flamingos and pool noodles. But Karen didn't stop there. She launched into this dramatic speech about unauthorized events, community safety, and how she feared for her well-being. It was almost impressive how she managed to twist a quiet afternoon into something that sounded like a neighborhood crisis. One officer looked over at me and asked, "Is this your house?" I nodded, trying not to roll my eyes. "And you invited these people?" I nodded again. "Anyone causing a disturbance?" I shook my head. "Nope, just grilling and playing cards." Meanwhile, a few of my neighbors started walking over, clearly curious. Some of them had their own stories about Karen, how she once reported a kid for skateboarding too close to her driveway, or how she called animal control on someone's cat for sitting on her porch. One of them, Dave from across the street, leaned over and whispered, she called the fire department once because someone lit a candle on their balcony. But here's the twist: one of the cops suddenly started asking her questions. Not me. Her. That's when everything shifted. There was something they recognized. And the mood changed again. What they said next would flip the entire story on its head. The moment the officers shifted their focus toward Karen, you could feel the energy change. One of them glanced at his partner, then stepped aside and quietly spoke into his radio. Karen, still going on about safety concerns and rule violations, didn't even notice. But I did, and so did a few others standing nearby. It was subtle, but something was definitely off. This wasn't just a casual check-in anymore. Then the questions started getting more specific. "Ma'am, are you the one who placed the 911 call?" She nodded proudly, as if she expected a thank you. "Did you state that there was a dangerous disturbance occurring at this address?" Again, she nodded, completely unaware of where this was going. "And were you threatened in any way today?" That one caught her off guard. She paused, then stammered, "Well, no, but I felt unsafe." "That's enough, isn't it?" The officer didn't answer. He just looked at her, then pulled out his notepad. That's when Karen's confidence started to fade. She asked, "Why are you questioning me? They're the ones throwing the party." But no one said anything. Everyone, including my guests and a few neighbors who had come out from their homes, stood there watching. The quiet tension was heavy, like something was about to snap. Meanwhile, I noticed one of the other officers walking around my property, checking things out. He looked at the guests, the grill, the speaker, nothing unusual. When he came back, he gave a slight nod to his partner, like confirming there was no disturbance at all. But instead of leaving, they stayed. And then one officer looked directly at Karen and said, "Ma'am, do you mind if we ask you to wait right here for a moment?" Her face twitched, just slightly. You could tell she wasn't expecting that. She folded her arms and tried to hold her ground, but the nerves were creeping in. I didn't know what was going on, but something told me Karen's little plan was starting to backfire in a way she hadn't prepared for. And what happened next? None of us saw it coming. Karen stood there stiffly, arms crossed, lips pressed, so tight they disappeared into her face. The officer who had asked her to stay put stepped away again, speaking quietly into his radio. Everyone was holding their breath. The music had long stopped, the pool was empty, and even the kids were just watching silently from the steps. But then, just when it felt like things might cool off, a second patrol car pulled up. That's when the twist really hit. Out of the second car stepped another officer, but this one wasn't just responding to a noise complaint. He walked straight toward Karen with purpose, flipping through a small folder in his hand. I saw her blink twice, her confident posture starting to sag. The officer didn't say anything at first. He just looked her over and finally said, "Ma'am, we received a report last month that matches your name. Were you by chance involved in an incident on Maple Drive concerning false emergency calls?" Karen froze. People started whispering around me. Maple Drive wasn't even in our neighborhood, but just one over. That's when I remembered there had been a local message going around the HOA Facebook group weeks ago about someone calling 911 over suspicious activity that turned out to be kids selling lemonade. Could that have been her? She stammered. I don't know what that has to do with today. This is a separate matter. I was protecting the community. But the new officer wasn't buying it. He asked again, more firmly this time, "Are you aware that making repeated false emergency calls is a serious offense?" My jaw nearly dropped. This was no longer just about a ruined afternoon. If what he was suggesting was true, Karen might have a history of using 911 like it was her personal complaint line. And now, with 2 calls tied to her name and officers documenting everything. This wasn't just HOA drama anymore, it was escalating into something way bigger. The party might have been over, but this story was about to explode. Karen's face went pale. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but no words came out. The officer with the folder continued, calmly but clearly. "We've got a pattern here. This is your second false emergency call in less than 2 months. You said you feared for your safety, but every witness, here including your neighbors, says there was no threat. Just a pool party. No noise complaints, no violations. You understand how serious that is, right?" She tried to deflect. They were blocking the street. And the noise, what about the children? But the officer held up a hand, stopping her mid-rant. "We've already checked. The road was clear, the music was well within limits, and the gathering was on private property. Nothing here qualifies as an emergency. You called 911 and used emergency resources without cause." Everyone was silent, could hear nothing but the soft splash of water against the edge of the pool. The tension had peaked. Then came the moment that left everyone stunned. One of the officers politely asked Karen to step aside and informed her that she would be receiving a formal citation for misuse of emergency services. And just like that, the look on her face shifted from defiant to completely stunned. But that wasn't even the final twist. As they were wrapping up, Dave, my neighbor from across the street, suddenly spoke up. "Actually, since we're all here, I think it's time we talk about something the rest of us have been dealing with." He pulled out his phone and showed the officers a string of messages from the HOA's private app. There it was. Karen had been posing as a board member, sending warnings, even threatening fines. But she wasn't on the board. Not even close. One of the officers raised an eyebrow, impersonating an HOA official. "That's something we'll have to document too." Karen didn't speak again. She just stood there, deflated. The party may have ended, but for the first time, the neighborhood felt lighter. She came to shut things down, but in the end, she exposed herself instead. After the officers finished taking statements and notes, they handed Karen a citation and let her know that the impersonation claim would be passed on to the HOA board and city code enforcement. She didn't say a word, just turned and walked away. Head down, no clipboard in sight. For someone who had spent years bossing the entire block around, it was the quietest we'd ever seen her. The neighbors who had gathered began to relax, sharing looks that said everything. It felt like a shift, like maybe the neighborhood could finally breathe. I apologized to everyone for the interruption and thanked the officers for being patient. They told me I handled the situation well and reminded me that I had every right to host a respectful gathering on my own property. That small bit of validation hit deeper than I expected. For the first time, it felt like the rules were actually working in favor of the people who follow them, not the ones who twist them for control. Over the next few days, the neighborhood buzzed with talk about what happened. Turns out, Karen's fake HOA warnings had been upsetting a lot more people than I realized. Dave even got a call from the actual HOA board, thanking him for speaking up. They sent out an official notice confirming that Karen held no position and that any future threats from her should be reported immediately. Since then, things have been surprisingly peaceful. The next weekend, a few neighbors even came by for a small get-together, no drama, just good company. It's wild how one backyard pool party ended up exposing so much. So if you've ever dealt with an HOA Karen trying to run the neighborhood, just remember, sometimes karma doesn't knock. Sometimes it shows up in uniform with a clipboard of its own.